And later on in some of these elections, election of 1864, people are going to vote. When they go to vote, they're going to walk between two columns of Union soldiers with their ballot in their hand. So if they're not voting the right way, they're going to have trouble getting through. So he's pulling some fairly strong-arm tactics in some of his. He's not. Don't think Lincoln is, Mr. Democratic, civil rights, equality for all, and protect the Constitution. He's taking some dictatorial steps here to preserve the integrity of the Union. Remember, if they ask you the question, why does the Civil War exist? What's the cause of the Civil War? Obviously, slavery is the elephant in the room, but the answer is to preserve the Union. That's what Lincoln's telling everyone. That's what he believed. It's to preserve the integrity of the United States. Okay. On the issue of why, the North won, or does the South have a chance? There's actually quite a bit of debate on this. The debate in favor of the South is the South doesn't really have to defeat the North. All they have to do is defend their own territory. So they don't really need to defeat the North. All they have to do is defend. And the South has better generals and more highly trained military leaders. Lee is actually offered the command of the Union Army, and he basically turns it down because he doesn't want to fight against his fellow Virginians. But when we look here at the statistics, it's hard to see how the South can possibly win. The best the South can really hope for in the Civil War is a negotiated settlement, somehow. Total population, we have over twice as many, but when we get down to free population, remember we're counting slaves here, we have 21 million against 5.5. Talk about slave population, we've got 3,500,000, we've got 400,000, those are all in the border, or 400,000, those are all in the border states. Soldiers, twice as many soldiers. Railroad miles, 3.5, 4, almost 4 times as many railroad miles. The railroad system basically is, the South is steamships going down the Mississippi filled with cotton bales. And they're basically supplying Great Britain, which is undergoing its industrial revolution in the cotton business. So the South is feeding raw cotton to Great Britain, which they're turning into cloth. It's also feeding raw cotton to the North. The North is one of the largest industries in the North is the textile business. Manufacturing, 90% of all manufacturing is in the North. 10% in the South. Firearms, 97 and 3. This is just not going to work out. It's not going to pencil out. You cannot have 3% of the firearm production and win a war. Bales of cotton look good, obviously, but look at this. We've got 4,500,000 in 1860, and we're down to 300,000 in 1864. One of the strategies that the North imposes in the Civil War is what's called the Anaconda Plan. An anaconda is a boa constrictor, and they basically set out a naval blockade and encircle the South and block off all cotton exports. And they're fairly effective at that. So they're going to surround the South, and then they're going to split the South in two by taking control of the Mississippi. That's their overall military strategy. Blockade, split down the Mississippi, which they managed to do. And exports. Now, the reason that the Confederacy has 70% of the exports is because most of the exports from the United States are cotton, raw cotton. This doesn't make the South rich. Just means that most of what's exported is actually cotton, and that's all grown in the South. Railroads. I don't know if you can see this. This is an actual map, historical map of the period. But you can see a fairly intense or dense railroad network. This is sort of like the industrial heartland of the United States that runs from Chicago to Ohio, Pennsylvania. Actually, most of the manufacturing sites in the United States are located in Pennsylvania at this time. And then to the East Coast, New York. So, and then down in the South, you see a few railroad spurs coming down here, but it's considerably less dense down here. What this map also doesn't show you is that we're at the beginning of the railroad boom. And most of these railroads, or lots of these railroads, run on different gauges. A gauge is the distance between the tracks. So a lot of these, we see this, the railroad system is far more fragmented than you see here, because actually there'll be one railroad that has a certain gauge of track, and all its locomotives and wagons and everything are made for this size, and then when it runs into the next company's track, it'll be a different gauge. And so you got to unload everything, reload it on the new cars, and so what we're going to see during the course of the Civil War is we're going to see a lot of standardization happening in the North to make that much more efficient. And what we're going to see in the South is the Union Army is going to come and destroy it. So the South is basically going to lose its transportation infrastructure in the course of the Civil War. Sherman's March to the Sea and things like that. And the North is going to continue to grow. Every time the South attacks the North on Northern territory, it's a horrible, horrible, horrible military situation. A lot of times it's a situation too, but when Lee goes to Antietam or Lee goes to Gettysburg, he's massacred. Or not massacred, but it doesn't work out well. He's basically defeated and goes back to the South. So the Southern armies never really go into the North and destroy much. The Northern armies go into the South. Anyway, a lot of the questions, I show you this because a lot of the questions on the test deal with economic development, relative stages of economic development in the North and the South, and because one of the guys who makes the questions is a railroad and economic history specialist of the Gilded Age, the next age. He likes to ask questions about economic development and railroads. Railroads are a rough sort of litmus test on economic development. If you have lots of railroads, you're more economically developed. Okay, what are the strategic imperatives for Lincoln in the Civil War? He's got to keep the border states in the Union. He can't let the border states all go to the South. And he can't let the South, remember the South is providing Great Britain with huge amounts of cotton, and France, I suppose, to a degree also, but more so Great Britain. It cannot allow Great Britain to recognize the South as a separate country, and it cannot allow the South Great Britain to enter the war on the side of the South. Great Britain is still the most powerful country in the world. If they really wanted to break the northern blockade of the South, they could. Definitely got to keep Great Britain out of the war. Great Britain will not enter the war if they think the South doesn't have a chance to win. And that's the key. You have to keep any hope of victory away from the South. You have to make it clear to the British that the South does not have a chance to win. If it looks like they might have a chance to win, then the same thing that will happen in the Civil War has happened with France in the American Revolution. As soon as the American rebels look like they can actually beat Great Britain in the American Revolution, the French become their ally, and they are the ones that hold the British at bay at Yorktown. And that's why the Americans win the American Revolution, is because of their French allies. You've got to keep those Europeans out of this war, because they can change the course of this war. And you've got to maintain political support for the war on the home front. And that's a very, very dicey issue. That's a much more difficult issue than actually defeating the South. One of the things they talk about in AP U.S. history as far as the objectives asking questions is that dissent on the home front is one of the things they're going to talk about. And I'll have some pictures of draft riots. Okay, for those who would like to know what Fort Sumner really